welcome to the channel. I am Summer. Today's haircut, we are gonna learn a lot. This is for fine, thin-haired clients or yourself that you wanna be able to have layers. I'm going to be explaining the most important thing to do with your hair when you want to create the shape of movement and layers in a nice face frame. It's gonna be very important. And with that being said, let's get started. All right, so we are going to get started. Like I said, this is going to be a cut geared specifically for fine, thinner hair types to create layers while keeping thickness, because believe it or not, it is possible to have some layers with your thin and finer hair. Before we get started, I want you to take a good look at this mannequin. I'm gonna show you a little spin shot, and I want you to really study it and look at what it is that you see with the length and the thickness that we have in the hair right now, because it's gonna be key for moving into creating our layers. So if you didn't see it, I want you to share in the comments what you noticed first with the hair. If you look at these ends, you can see that they are quite kind of spacey. You can see a good gap here from where the hair remains a little bit more full throughout here, and then it gets quite spacey and thin down at the ends, and especially along the front, especially in this corner area where the shoulders meet. You can see clear through to my hands, and that's a good like 2 inches of length that we have here that is just completely see-through, meaning it's very thin and fine. If you were to take this head of hair and go ahead and start layering it, you're gonna create a hole that's gonna take away more thickness from the hair. It's gonna make it look even more thin and fine. So I'm going to show you guys for an example. If you come in to take a layer like you would regularly, I'm gonna actually clip this a little bit how I would at least move the hair in front of the shoulders. If you were to come in here and grab a section like I normally would, and I always say, let your perimeter fall. So we've let our perimeter fall here. Look how thin this is. There's literally basically no hair left on these ends. From this point on, you can clearly see that they're thin. So if you take all this hair here, we let our baseline fall and cut it. I'm gonna round it out like I would any other layer. And you let that fall back down. I'm gonna remove this hair to go forward. All you've done is create more of a thinned out look because there is no thickness to this underneath. It's very sparse. You can clearly see, like it's very thin. So when you go in and you add more layers to hair, that the perimeter is not a solid, thick line, you're just going to make it look more thinned out and more sparse. So as we do that, we come back here to the center. Look at that. All that hair is so thin and it looks more fine. So first and foremost, the step, anytime you want layers, whether your hair is like thin or not, even if you have really thick hair and maybe it's just damaged and the ends have thinned out, you need to have a solid, strong baseline here. So that way you have a nice, thick starting point, as thick as you possibly can have naturally, that you need to bring your length up to before you can go ahead and create layers. Especially in this front, you can see it is so sparse and thin here. If you go and you layer all of this hair and you're pulling it up and your underneath perimeter is thin, it's going to look thin. So that is the first and foremost thing you need to assess with any client or with yourself if you're wanting some layers. Where is it that you need to bring the length up to create a solid foundation so you can go in and layer it and create shape? So on this mannequin here, some people don't always want to part with the length, and I understand that, but you need to really be realistic with it. You could opt to bring it up just to this point here. We've got a good amount of hair that's quite thin and sparse, but even still underneath that, I can tell here it's gonna be not quite as thick and full. So I'm gonna give this mannequin the good trim that it needs. We're gonna bring up the length a good 2 to 3 inches, I would say that is, before we judge on where we're gonna cut the layers. So I'm gonna section her off like I did normal, and I'm gonna dry cut this mannequin so you guys can see everything. just because it's much easier to see where the weight is or isn't on the dry hair versus wet. So if you were in salon cutting, you could opt to cut their perimeter dry if you wanted to. That way you can really see exactly what you're cutting. And then go ahead and re-wet it if you want to create your layers afterwards. That's personal preference. But for this video, I'm gonna just be cutting everything dry. And we're separating right in that ear region like normal. And clipping that out of the way. So now we're back to our back section, and I'm just gonna let my bottom section out here to create my new length, which this mannequin needs it. I highlighted her earlier, so it only added to it looking more thinned out. And I'm gonna actually push her head down just ever so slightly. And so we're gonna be removing right up into this line. I'm gonna leave it a little bit longer than what I think. I actually wanna bring it up more, but for right now, we'll leave it longer, and we can always remove more length once we have the perimeter cut. Because I do understand that while it's very important to have people, you know, get the most thick and full baseline, I get not everybody wants to cut off exactly what they need. So give yourself a little wiggle room, but really try to cut it as short as possible, as short as that it needs to, not necessarily as possible, to keep that thick, full line. And I am opting to do a blunt cut. A blunt cut is always gonna create a nice, solid line there. So people with that finer or thinner hair texture, it's gonna create the most weight through your ends versus point cutting. So I can clearly see my guide. It's like literally barely any hair even to cut in this point. I'm gonna let all this top fall because, yep, there's not that much to cut. I clearly can see the line that I'm creating here. And then just go straight across, following my guide. See my guide? Cut. Last piece. Cut. And we have just a little tiny piece over here. I think I need to bring up in this corner. Yep, it just wants to kind of hang over here. Okay, much, much better. It has a nice, thick and full weight line. So like I said, I had a couple areas I feel like you could actually bring it up, but I think that this blends really well and you have a nice solid line here. So now when we go to create our layers, you're gonna be able to bring them up more so you can create some movement in here, but look how thick and full this weight line will remain. And that is because we made sure to create a nice, solid, thick base. The perimeter, which is your length. So when I say a weight line, baseline, perimeter, it is the length of your hair and how thick that is. So when your hair is too thin or if it's too long and broken and thins out, depending on if it's naturally just more thin and fine or if it's more thin because of damage from either chemical services or heat on your hair, You need to make this as thick as possible to be able to have the layers that you want. You always need to keep that in mind, because that is what's going to allow you to create more shape through the rest of your hair. So with this though being fine and more thin hair, I am still going to leave them on the longer side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come back to this center section, and while I kept this weight line nice and thick with the blunt cut, I'm gonna choose to point cut into the layers just because it's gonna create more softness. If you cut layers blunt, I tend to find that they end up looking very choppy, especially if you're not very skilled or doing it on your own, it's kind of hard. So I always say just to do a nice soft point cut. So we have some perimeter left out. I'm gonna create a little bit more insurance here and remove more hair to create even more thickness. So look at the difference of how thick that looks versus if I choose to cut into this, you are taking away more weight versus when you leave it, look how much thicker and fuller that is. So really with finer, thinner hair types, you don't want to have a layer that is below where the curve of the head is at that occipital region. So we're gonna come out, and I already kind of did do a layer, so it's there a little bit, and I'm just gonna point cut into this. So I'm going in, out, in, out, in, out to soften that up, bring it up. We're rounding, following my guide. And you could opt to leave this a little bit longer if you wanted to, but that just creates a nice short surface layer, and because they're point cutted, they're not quite as obvious, but you're gonna get some nice shape with it. And so even though the hair is dry, I'm moving through it the same exact way as I would when wet. So again, we're letting all of this perimeter fall. We're giving ourselves more hair here to keep a nice thick weight line. And even though I cut that one shorter, I'm gonna opt to not cut the rest quite as short, just to keep them more on that medium side. I'm gonna just lightly point cut into this to soften it. So again, we're rounding with the head, we're bringing everything up. Keep that weight line thick. I can't say it enough. And we're just gonna point cut right into all of this hair. So if you wanna create a shorter layer on the top, what I would do is I would just make sure to really angle it. So you're letting all that hair fall and just really lightly point cut in to that top layer to soften it up and give it a little bit of texture, not necessarily a set layer. Because what that will do, it'll allow you to have more shape up here, but you're not gonna get as hard of a weight line through the rest of the hair from that top layer. Because a lot of times the top of the head seems to hold a lot more hair. All that's out. I have an angle going here. So look at our shortest piece right here if you can see it. I mean, it's a little hard because there's not a ton of hair. So what I'm gonna do is just come in with my scissors and we're gonna point cut into that angle. So we have our own little guide right here. Perfect. So we have shape. It's very soft, but it's in there. When you go to reshape this with a blow dry or curl it, you're gonna have more movement throughout it, but you keep that nice, thick, full look throughout the hair, which, I mean, who doesn't want that, honestly? So I'm gonna repeat the same steps on the other side. I'm gonna have to blend this in a little bit where I cut this piece shorter to show you guys. So I don't know if you can see it as much as I can, like my eye goes directly right to it. I can see it, and then if I go and make it really announced, you can really see that there. So you can use your thinning shears. I'm just gonna, again, point cut into this just to soften it up more. And that blends fine. So if you ever cut a layer too short, you can always point cut into it and soften it up. And 9 times out of 10, people won't even know it's there. You will, it'll probably drive you crazy, but it's definitely salvageable. So now we're on this other side. Same thing, we're coming out, let that hair fall, keep it thick, and we're just point cutting. And then as we work our way to the top, we are angling, cut. What we're gonna do across the very, very top. Coming straight across the head here. We're just gonna pull this hair up. Now we've got a little bit of hair right here to cut into. And just lightly blend in this length. Okay, so we have some nice soft layers through the back. We still are maintaining a nice thick and full line. When I look at this, because I'm a psychopath, I can see right in here where it's a little spacey, but overall, like, it looks so much better than where we were when we started. Most people aren't going to notice that. You definitely, you know, don't feel like you would have to bring the length up, because overall people look at this and they see a nice thick and full line. They don't see anything that looks thin. So moving into the sides, we are going to have some length here we've got to remove. And the sides tend to be naturally more thin and fine. If I'm looking at this, honestly, in here, I'm really worried about this zone. This is right where the ear is, where it starts to curve into the back of the head. And this is always the danger zone for holes because of just the way the hairline changes. It goes up and around the ear. So you always want to be careful creating layers with anybody's hair type, but especially fine, thin hair. So what I'm going to do is section this off to create my side perimeter. And we're going to keep doing a nice blunt line. I'm just going to blend that in. My guide. We have this last little bit right here. So that has helped to even out with the length. I still personally am concerned about layering these sides because I'm worried that this section here is going to look a little thin. So we're gonna be very careful with how we create our layers. Now, if you push the hair forward, you don't notice it. So that's always something to keep in mind too with where your length is, of if you have to remove a lot of length or if you don't. If you tend to push the hair completely forward all the time, you can maybe get away with leaving more length because you're grouping it. so it looks more thick and full. So just be willing to cut some when need to, but then also know how you really like to wear your hair and how you're gonna style it, because that always changes to what you can get away with. So we're gonna blend in this other side with our length. I'm just gonna follow your guide. And then I'm gonna take a look at the front. We need to just barely cut at this other corner, and I'm just gonna come straight across because I can see that and match that up. Okay, perfect. So we have our side perimeter done. Now what you would wanna do, what I like to do is to first actually assess the layers with my finer, thinner hair clients, because that's the bulk of where you're going to create your side layers. Again, this is because I like to always be cautious of this area right in here where the back of that ear is. So I know if I'm gonna be creating some face framing pieces, I know that I'm gonna get more shape there, that I won't have to worry about this area as much, because you're gonna be opening up the face. If this were a client, I would suggest for them to create a little bit of a face frame, just because especially in here, it's looking a little sparse, and I think that the face frame would just help open it up and create more shape, because right now, the way this is, it's not doing like a ton for her as far as the weight goes. It's not that it looks bad, it just doesn't look quite as thick and full as the back. So I think cutting into it's gonna just lightly open it up, still be able to tuck it behind the ears, but you'll get more shape to just give some movement, because it's just kind of hanging right now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a diagonal back section right at the tip in front of the ear here. And I'm gonna clip this hair out of the way, and I'm gonna do the same on the other side. So we've got our face framing sections. These mannequins always wanna go squirrely on me. Good enough. Okay. So like I said, we're gonna be creating a soft face frame. I want to just lighten this up. Some of you might disagree with me, because you're gonna be like, you're all about keeping all this weight and thickness, and then you're gonna remove some of it. But it's kind of just thin there. I think it'll look better to open it up. What happens when you have hair that's like all one length and longer, that's thinner or really fine looking? It doesn't really help anything if you can see through it. It would be much better to just create some shape, so that way this hair, when you push it forward, is what's going to create that nice thickness and weight around your face. And these are able to like help accentuate that. So we're gonna come in a little at a time. I'm gonna start right at the chin. So what I'm doing is basically removing this in here. This little triangle essentially is what I'm trying to create with my face frame. So I'm gonna come in, and then I'm going to sliver down and pull towards me as I cut. And I'm just gonna do a little bit at a time. So I need to make that angle a little bit more severe. I can see my length down here. So what I'm gonna do is try to connect these more. So I'm coming in, I see my guide down here, and I'm gonna skim up this outer corner. Just this last little bit, and we'll be right at that bottom of the chin. Just this very front corner. There we go. So I'm gonna let out the rest of this hair. And I'm just gonna take this, I'm gonna pull it forward, and I'm just gonna lightly point cut into the hairs sticking out. What this is gonna do is create a little bit more layering and softness to the face frame. And as I do that, I'm gonna grab more hair from the back of the head, and we're gonna pull it all forward. And cut. So I'm grabbing my next section. I'm right behind the ear, and this is gonna come completely forward. And what that is going to do is allow us to create a little bit more layers and softness, but this weight here is gonna remain. So what it's essentially doing is helping to connect the rest of the sides into that soft face frame we've created. So it allows you to get more shape and movement, but you're not compromising this area here that we're concerned about with looking more thin. And again, when you push all that hair forward, it looks so much more thick and full, but now you have this face frame that opens up the face much more and creates much more shape and movement, so it looks like the hair is more thick and full. So now what we're gonna do is just repeat on the other side the same steps. So we're gonna let that down. We're gonna first connect our front sections. So I'm just grabbing a little bit from my first side here, and we're just gonna point cut and match that up. Perfect. Okay, so again, looking at this comb down, we have this little triangle area that we're basically going to be creating our face frame with and removing. So we're gonna come in, and I'm gonna sliver, pulling lightly towards me at first. Pulling it towards you creates a little bit more length, so that way you know you're not cutting off too much at first. Let me do that again. Hopefully you guys saw that. Coming in and just slivering, pulling towards me. So that's already opening that up nicely. And then what I want to do is I want to take a look at this bottom point. We're going to connect. So we're coming down from that bottom and cutting right up into our guide. Let out the rest of the hair. So I need to remove a little bit more length in here. It's a little bit longer. So right about in here is where it starts. I'm keeping in mind my length at the bottom, and it's in this middle region that I'm just connecting and blending in. Okay, and then what we're gonna do is the same thing. This is gonna come forward, twisting, cut. Grab your next section, coming forward, twisting, cut. And again, this is to help connect the face frame through the rest of the sides while still maintaining more weight in that back corner. So we've got one more section after here because we're still in front of the ear. Right at this ear here now. That's going to be our last section to blend in. So combing forward, cut. So technically this haircut is like a mix of traveling layers and a stationary guide layer. If you are unfamiliar, I'll post a video that I have where I compare the two on a side-by-side. But we did traveling layers in the back, and what traveling layers is where you're going around the head like this. Everything is coming out from each section, where a stationary guide is what we did for the front. We pulled everything forward to the front to the same section. So now that we have both sides done, we're gonna take a look from the front. We've got much more movement around her face. You could opt to shorten it. I want to reshape first a little bit so we can create more bend, because right now it's very, very straight, which is great to be able to see everything, but I want to kick it up a little bit with my blow dry. I'm just going to take another look. I feel like she still needs a little bit more length here on this side of the face. This has a little bit more softness to it, and I feel like it's just a little too long right here. So it starts right about there. So I'm gonna grab the hair. I'm angling down. And cutting. Sometimes when you have somebody who parts their hair on the side like this, because more hair is on one side of the head, oftentimes I feel like you might need to go in and like soften it up with either more point cutting, just because anytime hair looks thicker, it always looks longer. So if one side is drastically thinner than the other, you might have to tweak it and thin out one side, even if they're quote unquote matching up as far as the length, just because visually it will look off. So now that we have the bases done, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm gonna come through these sides and I'm just gonna skim the very, very top. So we're coming up. I wanna make sure all of this hair here completely falls out. And we're just gonna lightly point cut through the very top just to create some softness and help it to flow a little bit better. A lot of times creating the layers and fine thinner hair is done by point cutting on that outer surface. You don't want to cut into the hair too much. You don't want to come in here and go deep with it. You just want it on that very, very outer edge. And it almost seems like you're cutting absolutely nothing, but it does help to make a lot more shape. So all that hair fell, and just on this very, very top. much better. Like right in here, she actually needs a little bit of softness. Okay, so I'm gonna just reshape her a little bit to create more movement and bounce so you can see the layers a little bit better, but she came out so much better from where we started. We have, look at all this little movement we have here, and this is like completely stick straight. Much more movement, but look, we've got a nice, thick, strong line. The sides, you know, it's kind of that iffy along here in this corner, but again, when we push everything forward, it looks nice and thick. And then when we go to make this face frame pop, you're gonna have so much more movement in the face. It'll open it up really nice. So I'm gonna do that really quick, and then I'll show you guys what it looks like. So I'm just choosing to re-spritz her with some water just ever so slightly, just to get it lightly damp. So that way I'll be able to create some bend. And then I'm going to be using the T3 Airbrush Duo to create my movement today. All right, she is blown out. It is amazing what a blow dry does. This is why I actually too love these blow dry brushes. They are so easy to use to get that salon style blowout at home on your own, because you're not killing your arms, because it's a one single tool, and it just creates really nice shape and movement. What a difference. It looks completely different with that blow dry to show off those layers, open up that face frame. It came out so good, and we have so much thickness still. So much movement, so much thickness. You can't complain with that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna spritz her with some hairspray so that way you guys can see a nice final spin, and I'll get you guys out of here. All right, here we have our finished and final look. It is so amazing what a good blow dry does. We have maintained that nice weight line with lots of shape. Through the sides, we get plenty of movement, but when you push that hair forward, we still create that thick look, but you've got the movement. Same with the back, lots of shape and movement with those layers, but a nice, thick, solid line. And I love the face frame. It really opened up the face and gives more movement rather than it just being there dragging down. I hope you guys enjoyed today's tutorial. I'm gonna link below a video to my other channel, Summer Beauty, a video that I think would be really well for those of you that do have thinner and fine hair naturally, that you wanna be able to do all that you can to thicken it up besides doing the right haircut. So I will leave that link for you below. In the meantime, I will see you in the next one.